My last sexual encounter traumatized me, and now I'm celibate. My name's Brandy. It was a few years ago when this situation happened to me. I was young and going through my rebellious stage in adolescence. It certainly didn't help that my parents were ministers and were strictly religious. Even my grandparents as well. It's particularly significant to keep in mind that I have a certain love language. Many people express their love language in various particular ways, like giving, doing little things for one another, spending time together, or just simply giving each other personal attention, but in a unique personal way. Mine was through physical touch. It was my way of developing an intimate connection with my partner at the time. So with that in conjunction with me being the rebellious teen that I was, my boyfriend and I were sexually active. During that time, I never really considered myself empathic or spiritually aware. I was essentially tired of church life, and my walk with God was non-existent. But looking back on the experience, I realized that something was shown to me in a very raw and visceral way. And as traumatizing as it was, I now know it was a strict lesson I needed. My relationship with the Lord since then has been transformed in such a profound personal way that's hard to convey without coming across as just out there. Unless you're someone that's deep in the Lord and in His Word, then I know you can relate. Please be forewarned as I go deeper into the story that it will get vulgar and graphic to provide just enough detail for the sake of clarity. On the night of the experience, me and my boyfriend were just chilling, watching a movie on the widescreen Samsung mounted to the wall. Basically just a Netflix and chill type of vibe. I don't remember exactly what movie we were watching, but I remember when a provocative scene began playing. And looking back on how this situation unfolded, I can see how the different things that were in place at the time created the recipe for the terrifying experience that took place after. So that provocative scene was playing, and the more I watched, the more I started getting in the mood. I began subtly eyeing my boyfriend with a lustful, sensual grin, and he started looking back at me in the same manner. Within the next couple of minutes, our hints were so clear that it was more than obvious where this was leading. We began touching and getting more and more intimate, while the movie scene was still playing in the background. It eventually got to the point when my boyfriend was putting on a contraceptive as we were about to do it, when I heard a voice in my head like a subtle whisper saying, "Don't do it, Brandy." It sounded like my own voice, but it wasn't my voice, because it wasn't a voice I've ever heard before, even though it sounded like me. It kept repeating the same thing. "Don't do it, Brandy." And however strange as the situation was, I was beginning to get annoyed, although the voice itself wasn't aggressive or particularly obnoxious in any way. It was just continually persistent, all the while me and my boyfriend were already getting in the flow of things, and my drive was on full throttle. I wasn't about to slow down or stop for anything. I seriously wanted it. But that damn voice kept repeating itself in my head like a soft whisper, which was the thing that was really getting on my nerves. So vexed as I wasn't about to let anything stop me from doing whatever I wanted. So I eventually managed to tune the voice out, and me and my boyfriend followed through with what we were doing. Needless to say, we did the deed. So after a while, I noticed the voice was finally gone completely. However, it wasn't but a few seconds when we were relaxing after moments of fun, when my drive just came back out of the blue and much stronger than ever. Now, I know my own body, and this urge was not anything I had ever experienced before, nor was I used to it. And mind you, me and my boyfriend were already sexually active in general. This heightened sensation was completely new and out of left, and very strange, and honestly, it scared me a little bit. Here's where the traumatic situation finally occurred. At this point, the widescreen was turned off, which is going to be important to how I explain what happened. I was not used to this heightened level of arousal I was feeling, but it felt exhilarating, so naturally I told my boyfriend, "Let's go again." He responded saying, "Right now, give me a minute to recover at least." The moment he said that, this terrible, inexplicable, fiery rage was triggered. It enveloped me, and it took over to the point where I was literally seeing red. I was unreasonably furious and irrational. It was as if he had awoken a sleeping beast in me. It was so sudden and out of the blue, I had no control over myself. It was overwhelming and frightening at the same time. I shouted at him, "Let's go now!" He was shocked at my response and was like, "Hold on, let me get up first." I yelled at him even louder. "No, now, let's go, come on!" He was like, "Alright, chill." I wanted that second round, but deep down I just couldn't bring myself to terms with this overwhelming rage. It was like my chill calm personality was replaced with something inhumanely ferocious. Then I heard that subtle soft voice in my head once more. "Brandy, please don't do it." I was further enraged. I cursed and shouted, "Shut the fuck up! I'm doing it!" My boyfriend was looking back at me like I was insane. "Are you alright?" I said, "Hurry up and let's do this." The soft voice ever so calmly repeated one final time. "Brandy, please don't do it." I gritted my teeth and shut the voice out of my head once again. My boyfriend managed to ready himself in that brief amount of time, and the second he got started, the room became visibly even darker than before, almost like it was pitch black. As I said before, the widescreen Samsung was turned off, so we were already in a dark room, and the streetlights were still lit outside the window, so I knew it couldn't have been a power outage. There was absolutely no explanation for this sudden unnatural darkness that arose and permeated throughout every corner of the whole room, along with a feeling of absolute dread. It chilled my blood that ran cold, and I was absolutely terrified. To paint a picture of what I saw, my boyfriend was on top of me doing his thing, while I was looking up at him. That's when I saw this big black, absolutely hideous form. There are no words to describe how utterly beyond terrifying and horrific this demonic thing looked. The horns, its head, its eyes, and its mouth comprised an unparalleled horror that was not comparable to any horror movie or anything I had ever seen in my life. It was an absolute abomination. It wasn't like this giant black mass was behind my boyfriend. It was so large it literally enveloped him. I was frozen in terror while looking in its eyes, bright yellow-orange glowing and piercing into my very soul. What was even worse is when I felt its utterly frightening, blood-curdling smile that was absolutely nightmarish, and it saturated my whole being. I didn't just see it, I felt it, and it was pure unadulterated terror. The unparalleled fear that permeated throughout my entire being felt as if I was bathing in pure liquid ice. It was like every creep, serial killer, mass murderer, and sexual predator that ever walked the face of the earth was smirking at me at once like I was a piece of meat, and multiply that feeling by 1,000. I had never felt such unparalleled evil in my life, not even in my worst nightmares. I wanted to scream, but I was so petrified and overruled by unearthly terror that all I could do was whimper. Now, the part of this situation that seriously messed me up is when I realized that this giant black heinous embodiment of pure evil and terror was literally doing me through my boyfriend. It was the most traumatizing and sickening thing I ever experienced. I'm not gonna lie, I literally froze. I was frozen in terror. I didn't know what to do. I'm guessing my boyfriend kind of sensed that something was off with me, because as soon as he was finished, he asked what was wrong, as I wasn't my usual excited self in the moment, and came off as dead weight. I couldn't move. I couldn't even speak. I couldn't do anything because I was so overruled with absolute terror. He was looking down at me, not realizing he was in the heart of this large black mass. He was literally inside of it, so he wasn't seeing what I saw. There's no way he would have been able to see it from where he was sitting. I felt completely alone, and I thought I was gonna die. It was as if I were cursed with a horrendous image of the unimaginable horror of what I was seeing. Because the very sight of this diabolic abomination was so horrific, I felt like I was cursed with having its face seared into my memory for the rest of my life. And I felt like I was going through this experience completely alone. I ever so slowly with a short terror whispered to him, "Don't look up." But he was slowly shifting his head while I frantically repeated, "Don't look, don't look, don't look." Of course he could not see it. The dark mass sank into the center of the bed out of sight, though I still felt this eerie, unsettling change in the atmosphere like a lingering presence. and that thick, unnatural darkness was still in the room. I would not wish the sight of that demonic entity on my worst enemy. It was truly that horrific. Though a part of me was wishing my boyfriend could have seen at least a portion of the horror of what I saw just before it sank into the bed, so I wouldn't feel so completely alone in this experience. I just told him not to worry about it, and that I thought I saw a spider. My boyfriend didn't say anything, but I know he knew something was off about my demeanor, because our vibe just wasn't the same like it was just mere minutes ago. After a while, he had fallen asleep, and the whole time I lay tantalized in utter mental torment with this awful feeling that was so repugnant I can't even describe it, and it stayed with me the whole night. It was so awful I felt like throwing up, because I was so sick to my stomach from this heinous feeling. It was like the worst state of manic depression and despair imaginable. I felt as though I were in absolute torment. I could not sleep at all, and I was severely nauseous. I was not by any means a religious person, but I was so beyond desperate for some type of help at any means. I was willing to fall back on what my fundamental Christian Pentecostal parents had taught me, which was the last thing I would have ever resorted to, because I was in such spiritual darkness and unrest that my very mind itself was at the breaking point. But it was the only thing I knew spiritually. I started to pray, even more than I ever had in my life, and I prayed desperately. As strange as it sounds, I was searching desperately for that same soft voice I had cussed out just moments ago. I feel like a part of me knew that the voice was something trying to warn me of the spiritual danger I was in. I was literally begging to hear it again, begging for it to speak to me just one more time at the very least, because I was suffering inside. I literally felt my soul suffering. And what made it even worse was that I heard absolutely nothing in response to my desperate pleading for the rest of the night. I started crying, and I gradually began bawling my eyes out hysterically because my mind was suffering so badly from this awful, overwhelming feeling of extreme depression. This is the point when I literally recognized Jesus' voice. Just for clarity, I've always believed in Jesus. I just wanted to live my life my own way rather than following some strict religious church mentality. It wasn't until the sun started to come up when I finally heard that soft voice once again. This time, it said, "Brandy, you know that terrible feeling you're feeling right now?" I said yes. The voice said, "That's how I feel when you don't listen to me." Even though I was already emotionally broken from how I was feeling, I felt like my heart just fell to pieces when I heard that last sentence. Because it wasn't until that moment when I knew that it was Jesus speaking to me. And I could never imagine having the impunity to cause anyone to feel so unimaginably awful like how I was feeling, with no shame whatsoever. Especially Jesus. At that point, I can honestly say that I knew it was him, because I wasn't just hearing his voice. I actually felt his emotions and the pain and the hurt I had caused him to feel. But not just because of what he had just spoken to me. I actually felt his pain. It didn't feel like a feeling that was coming from me, as if I feel a certain way, or I'm in reaction to something. Not even like I'm feeling something for someone else. It's more like a perspective shift, if that makes any sense. I was not living up to the standards of my own internal convictions. I basically just wanted to experience life, as church was all I had ever known growing up. Though I was very much unaware of how real and dangerous the spiritual realm is. I've learned that Jesus hurts so deeply and emotionally whenever I've ignored the spiritual discernment he's gifted me with to make decisions that led me down a road of self-destruction, sadness, and danger, just like a father hurts for his own daughter. And then nothing he could say or put in my conscience could ever get through to me, though he was always there for me whenever I needed him. I began spilling out all my emotions, my pain, depression, loneliness, all the feelings that embodied this darkness weighing on my chest before him as I was saying, Jesus, I am so sorry. I don't want to hurt you anymore. Forgive me. Please don't leave me. I prayed, and I wept, and I begged for this awful feeling to be taken away from me, because I knew this is what it feels like to be without him, and I didn't want to feel that for the rest of my life, and forever. The last thing I heard was, "It's gonna be okay." And the awful depressing feeling was lifted from me like a massive weight off my chest. It felt like I could finally breathe again. And this amazing peace came over me. My mind was still, and I was able to finally rest. Reflecting back on the experience, I've since come to a few conclusions, though this might not be true for everyone except for spiritual empaths like myself in particular. The intimacy of sex for people like us, even if it's just casual, is magnified over 1,000-fold. The implications this therefore entails is whatever psychological engrossments or defects the other person has, their mental pathologies, all their emotional clutter and baggage. We literally absorb everything and take all their gunk into our own spirit. We exchange energies, and we merge and become one spirit during the act. This is the basic principle behind the meaning of adultery, because when we exchange sexual energy, we actually adulterate. Our spirits literally merge temporarily, but even without the sexual aspect, a lot of this still happens anyway when we're around other people. And then we have to take some time to be by ourselves because we get drained easily. When you take it from a spiritual aspect regarding many people as a society, a lot of people have guardian angels. But on the same note, a lot of people walk with demons. Ever since that horrific experience with my boyfriend, I've been able to feel them around people, and I'd make it a point to keep my distance. I've since had a couple other encounters with that demonic entity from that night I talked about, that horrific abomination I had seen. For some time I felt its evil presence around, but at a distance. It was never too close. It could never do anything to me if it wasn't for the divine protection of the guardian angels of the Lord encamped round about me. Ever since that same night, I vowed to stay celibate until marriage, because the experience was so traumatic. Though I've been tempted with sexual thoughts of lust. There were even several seemingly out of nowhere situations with certain dudes I've been tempted to be sexual with on many occasions, but I could always sense in my spirit from my intuition and discernment a deception, and I knew that those situations were snares from that demon plotting against me. Even with certain females I was associated with, it became apparent to me that there were demons around near my circle of friends conspiring to tempt me. It's almost like I have a knack for doing stupid things, but Jesus has shown me so much patience, more than I can even understand. He's delivered me from so many dangerous situations, and I honestly don't know what would have happened to me if it wasn't for him. The other frightening experience after that same night was when I was with a few of my friends at a house party. And then the last experience took place another night in my apartment with two of my closest friends. But those are stories for another time. So long story short, I eventually got completely delivered from that evil spirit, and I haven't felt its presence since. Before I close this off, I just want to say one more thing. Remember when I said how us empaths exchange energies and merge spirits during sex? With that said, just like there are sexually transmitted diseases, there is also such a thing as spiritually transmitted diseases, or simply put, the transmission of spirits. I'm truly grateful for Jesus Christ, my Savior, my protector, my best friend, trying to warn me that night, and then having the understanding and patience to be there for me in the lowest emotional point of my life, even though I didn't listen.